had seat belts for chairs, you would need to put them on today, because we're going to be moving at rocket speed, and there's so much information that we have to give you in the hour. This is part one. Just so you know, this is part one of two. The first one, and what you're going to go through today and right now for the next hour, is really it's a recap of things that we've been doing here in the state of Illinois for 4 separate workshops. We're live? Awesome. So we are live, and welcome everyone. It's great to be here. There you go. Thank you. I'm excited to be here in Illinois. I want to welcome all our virtual participants again, and let you know that my name is Jeff Abramowitz. I'm here with Andrea Lopez. We're going to be really having fun over the next hour, but part of that is an engagement with you, both here in the room and virtually. So here, if you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll get it to you. Virtually, please, if you have a question, I want you to please put it in the chat box and in your Wova app, and we'll make sure we get to it. We have somebody in the room that's going to be your voice. Kirsten's in the back. She's going to be monitoring, and she'll be raising her hand on your behalf. So you can call out to her and say, please, get my question, and she'll get it to me, I promise. So today is part one of part two. The first, and some of the ground rules is you're going to get the slide deck, you're going to get the material, so please don't feel like you have to take notes. We are going to move kind of fast and accomplish a lot of good things today. But we're talking about better practices in hiring and retaining justice-impacted individuals. And I use better practices because I had read an article not long ago, and the person doing the article talked about the use of the word best practices. Everybody use the word best practices? We all use it, right? But if it is the best practice, then why do we do any better, right? So I like better practices, like we're always doing things better. So we're going to be talking about that. Before we even kick off today, I want to get you thinking, both at home while you're having your coffee or virtually in your office, but as workforce development specialists and people that work in this field. I want you to, who do you work with that help get justice-impacted people successfully back to work? Who is it that you go to when you need to work with that person that's just coming home, that's struggling with some issues? I don't want an answer. I just want you to think about it, because we're going to be talking about it. And I want you to kind of get in your head, I called John about that, or I called Tony about that, or Martha about that, whatever it is. Start thinking about who you refer to. And the truth is that we have a number of stakeholders that are all in play in all of this. And those stakeholders, it could be many, that work with us all the time that we just don't, I guess, call out or recognize the work that they do in helping people with a criminal background get back on their feet. And I'm going to be very intentional today, because I won't use the words ex-con or ex-felon or anything like that. I think words do matter, right? And the words that I use when talking about people with a criminal background are people that are justice impacted. I like that, because it doesn't mean you don't necessarily have to have gone to jail in order to be impacted by our justice system. So we'll be talking and using those words today, and I ask that you kind of do the same when you refer to people, that you refer to people that are gone through the justice system as somebody justice impacted or a returning citizen. I think those are kind of more appropriate in this setting. We did put out a WOVA poll and a number of questions. If you have an opportunity, if you're virtual, go ahead and take a second and fill those out. We did get a lot of responses, and we might be referring to them from time to time today, so just be mindful of that. Before we go further, I thought we might have popped over a slide or two, but I want to take a second to introduce myself and my cohort in crime, my companion here, Andrea Lopez. Andrea, can you take a second and introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrea Lopez. I've been working with Jeff doing these workshops for a little over 2 years. I retired from my position as a faculty member in Temple University in the HR department. And while I was there, I was a faculty advisor for the TU SHRM chapter, the student chapter. And we started doing job readiness training for community partners, new immigrants, people in the neighborhood who were underemployed and also people who were justice impacted. I wanted my students to feel that even though they were students, they spent a lot of time feeling not enough, that they had skills that they could share. And so when I retired, I reached out to Jeff and we started working. I work part-time. Retirement is you have to give some time to that. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. You're going to hear she's my right arm when we have these discussions, and she fills in a lot of the holes from the HR perspective that you're going to be hearing about today. So I'll tell you a quick bio for me so you understand where I come from and the glasses that I wear. Some people I know in the audience have heard me speak before and know a little bit about my background, but they say that the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and what? What's the second most important day? Anybody? Second most important day of your life? The day you die? I would argue the second most important day of your life is the day you figure out why you were born. And for me, that occurred on March 12th, 2012. I was in a courtroom in Philadelphia, and I was a lawyer in Philadelphia for a little over 20 years, made some really bad choices in life. And on that day, March 12th, is the first time in my career, 20 years as a trial lawyer, I stood in a federal courtroom and stood there not as a lawyer, I stood there as a defendant. And I was indicted on a financial crime, and on that day, I was sentenced to 5 years in a federal prison and was taken from the courtroom and began my 5-year journey inside our federal court system. Returned back to Philadelphia. I'm home 8 years. Returned back to Philadelphia 8 years ago, September, and was homeless. I lived in a shelter in North Philadelphia in Philly and began teaching GED math was my first job at $7 an hour. And from there became a director of a Title II adult literacy agency, and after that became an executive director at a very large workforce development agency in Philadelphia that operated the CareerLink system. Interesting. And now I'm currently the CEO of a national organization, a nonprofit called the PD Green Program, which does educational tutoring inside and outside of jails and correctional facilities across the country. And we help men and women get smarter, preparing them for their journey coming home, and then work with them as they come home, either bridging them to college, getting a credential, doing a whole bunch of good stuff. So that's kind of the glasses that I wear. I want to kick us off today, and I'm going off script. Sorry, because I need to tell the story. I told you that when I came home, I was homeless, and I was living in a shelter. I would walk literally an hour and a half to get from the shelter to our local CareerLink, our Career One Stop. And I was usually given a 3-hour pass. So on my first visit to the CareerLink, I went down there and walked because I came home with about $22 in my pocket, and I couldn't afford a bus. So I walked literally all the way down several miles to the CareerLink and waited, checked in, sat down and said, I need to speak to somebody. I just came home and I really need some guidance, try to find a job. And they said, sit down. And I sat in the waiting room and waited while someone in the back ate lunch and waited. And finally, I had to leave because I had a 3-hour pass. It took me an hour and 15 minutes to walk there. I had an hour and 15 minutes to get back. I couldn't wait any longer for this individual. So eventually, but for the grace of God, I did. I went back and I ended up moving forward in my career. But now I want to fast forward 4.5, almost 5 years. I get a job as an executive director that now oversees that CareerLink system. And the very first thing that I did was I gathered all of our few hundred staff together and I told them that story. And I told them it was but for the grace of God that I came back to that CareerLink because I was frustrated. And I said, you never know who you're working with and who walks in your door. And you don't know what their baggage is, what their problems are, what their journey has been. You don't know if they're there if they have 5 minutes or 5 hours. You don't know if they have children in daycare that they need to tend to or get back to a job or whatever their needs are. So the lesson, if there's one takeaway from today, is I don't want you to assume anything. don't assume anything when you work with individuals that are justice impacted. Ask questions. Is there any Ted Lasso fans here? There's a great Ted Lasso episode. He looks at a sign and sees a billboard. It says, from Walt Whitman, it says, "Be curious, not judgmental." So for the next hour or 48 minutes, I want you to be curious and not judgmental. So I've given you a few minutes, and those virtually a few minutes to think about those people that you rely upon working with justice-impacted individuals, getting them back to work. So just shout out, who are they? Who would you call? Somebody comes fresh home from incarceration. Who are you calling for support to get that person back into the workforce? Anybody? Who? Job partnership, she said. Job employers, right? You're calling your employers. Who else are we calling? Who else might we call working with somebody just coming home from prison or jail? I'll repeat them. Community-based organizations. Awesome. Absolutely. Community-based organizations, reentry programs, other support agencies that are, who else? Yeah, back there. Mental health professionals. Yes, absolutely. Going to be calling possibly some mental health professionals to get some support. Who else? Department of Human Services. Possibly, absolutely. Who else? Who? Department of Rehabilitation Services. Very good. Yep. Anybody else? There's a lot, right? There's a lot of stakeholders. Who is that? Training providers, yeah, for sure. Oh, cheat sheet up there. There you go. Yeah, I gave it to you. Yeah, those are the buckets, right? The career link, obviously, a place you're going to go coming home. Reentry partners and community partners, for sure. Your occupational training partners. How about education partners, right? Education partners, yeah. Yeah, the parole officer. You might want to call the parole officer. Hey, got to ask you a question. Can John do this job? Yeah, we're going to place him here. Probably a really good question to ask before you actually place the person, don't you think? I think so. Your correctional parole officer, possibly even a court or a judge to see if he's able to do that position, and then employers. A lot of stakeholders that are at the table that we need to talk about and talk through. I want you to set the standing a little bit more here in Illinois. So this workshop is one of a series of 4 that have already been done here in the state, and that I've been doing for workforce providers, and I invite you to come to the next series, which is the last workshop is going to be number 6. But we're talking about best practices or better practices in getting people back to work and all the things you need to know. But here in Illinois, remarkably, you're doing a pretty darn good job when you look at the rest of the country. There are 90 available jobs for every 100 job openings in Illinois. So there is no question in our country that we have more jobs available today than we have people to fill them. We have more jobs available today than people to fill them. And that challenge has opened up this national door to say, what labor pool haven't we touched yet? Let's see. And then all of a sudden, well, we have these men and women that have been criminal backgrounds that have been denied jobs for how long? And now all of a sudden, there's a discussion about getting back to work. Also interesting about the state of Illinois is it's really one of 4, maybe 5 states right now that have returned their labor force back to pre-pandemic stages. Pretty impressive for the state. And something that this just came out in the U.S. Department of Commerce did a whole report out on this. And it's included in the material, so you could take a look at it. But really, you're doing a good job, good work here in Illinois. It's some really good stuff. But that doesn't tell the whole story. The whole story goes deeper because, quite frankly, we know there are about 1.2 million people incarcerated in our country, and about 180,000 of them are in the federal system. The rest are in our state jails and county prisons and DOCs. And then we also have about 500,000 people that are in jail and have not been convicted yet. Can I repeat that? 500,000 people in our jails and prisons that have not been convicted yet. Do you know why they're in jail? In effect, so, but that's not really the answer. Anybody else? He said they were awaiting trial. It's true in a way, but why are they really in jail? Yeah, they can't afford bail. We live in a cash bail system. And if you don't have the money, it's like, show me the money, Jerry Maguire, right? If you don't have money, you can't get out of the system. And therefore, the reality is that's what happens. When it comes to men and women coming back home, the reality is that the unemployment rate is staggering. During COVID, we never came close to 27% unemployment rate. But for the person that's got a criminal background, the average unemployment rate is 27%. Now that is higher than the peak of the Great Depression, just to put it in context. And yet it's gone under the radar screen for so long as far as our priorities. Now, there are things in Illinois that you guys have been doing which are also pretty cool. There are things that we encourage employers to look at: bonding, federal and state bonding programs that are here, tax credits, the work opportunity tax credit, probably the most underutilized tax credit in our entire country, and also these clean slate laws. We're going to talk about all of those. But the reality is that you've been doing some things and setting the stage of moving the ball forward, of getting people. But what are some of the truest, highest barriers? What are the hardest things? What are the things that really stand in the way of getting people with a background a job and employment? What are the big ones? Well, I think they're pretty clear. We're going to break them down into buckets. You kind of gave me some of the buckets we talked about, but we're going to go through them. One is education and training. Education and training. And I didn't tell you all of my bio. You'll have to read it. But one of the things that I do currently is I work for the United States Department of Education as a subject matter expert, and I oversee their portfolio called LINCS. So if you're not on LINCS, you need to get onto LINCS. It's lincs.ed.gov. It's in the material. But that's the U.S. Department of Education's website for communities of practice in careers, and I oversee and moderate the one for correctional and reentry education nationally. And I do believe that in all the work that we do, even if it's occupational training and getting people into those great jobs, that it really starts with education. It starts with education. That's where we have to begin, because adult literacy is, the data on adult literacy shows that low-skilled adult learners struggle in the workforce. And those are the ones that can't read and write. And in the prison setting, it's even more important because we have a captive audience, right? We have men and women that are behind the walls, that about 70% of them actually want to take classes. They want to get smarter. And yet we limit that. And we don't have enough space. We don't have enough teachers. We don't invest enough money in education behind the walls. And then we task them when they come home to start over and to get a job. And many of those jobs require reading skills and math skills and digital literacy skills and all those things that we don't put enough effort into while they're behind the walls. Part of that is also career exploration, and not saying that you have to give someone a job because they have to do it, because they want to do it. And it's a mindset thing. We're so conditioned when people come home from jail, get a job, get them to our career link, get them a job. And they'll come in and they're going to give you this. How many have heard this? I'll take anything. I call it the I'll take any. I tell people when they walk into my office today, if you say those words, I'll take anything, you have to leave, take the words back, and then come back in. Because I'll take anything is a really dangerous thing. And we have to be thinking about careers, about getting people to do things that they want and love to do, not that they have to do. Now, the person behind me, my partner in crime here, Andrea, will tell you, and we have this argument often, the importance of transitional employment, right?
Right, because finding the job that you want, that you love to do, that gives you purpose, is a process. And sometimes you have to, we all didn't end up where we are, right? We all started off someplace else with different ideas in mind. And for people who are just as impacted, there are also steps along the way. There are skills that they have to gain, showing up on time, not thinking that conflict means that they did something wrong, that they're going to get fired, learning how to have conversations, taking direction, things like that, that they have to sort of build. Some people are start off and they're great. Some people need to build up those skills. That's where transitional employment comes in. And so as long as, and transitional employment by definition should be transitional. It's not a sustainable, it doesn't pay a sustainable wage, but it gets, with direction and intention, it should accomplish a goal. Builds your resume, gets you some pocket money, gets you getting a different vision of yourself, some experience that you can talk about. What Jeff's argument is, and we agree on this, is that should be a step in the process. The problem is that when someone gets a job, if it's a transitional job, it might not be recognized. And then that person who has that job feels very stuck. It's not, after a while, it's not paying the bills. It's not feeding their soul. It's not giving them purpose. And then they feel that they failed, or they're afraid to go back, or they don't realize it's one step in the process. So I think that the idea is that that transitional employment has a role, but it's a very defined role that I think that we have to be content.
So I would say that in everyone in this room, if you work in this space, that you should have a big 3 words outside of your door, part of every conversation you have, and those 3 words are, and then what? And then what? I get you this job, and then what? And then what? Where are you going after that? So be thinking about what the pathway is and where you're going next is all part of that, all part of the journey. There are no question that adult education plays a vital role in all of this. 70% of all people behind the walls want to take a class, and as I said, it's not always offered, and yet is one of the barriers on the outside. And statistically, if you take one class, just one class inside of a prison or jail, you're at a 43% better chance of not going back. Just one class. What are we doing? Where are we investing our money? Think about it. 43% better chance. So there are things that we've weaved in. I currently work on a project with the DOE called the IET and Corrections Project. Does anybody know what an IET is? I know a few people. IET, it's the greatest tool. It's integrated education training. And it is where a math teacher is teaching fractions in or near a classroom where a carpentry teacher is teaching carpentry. And then on top of that, we're going to throw in some career preparedness stuff, right? Now you blend those things together, that contextualized learning piece, and that's the secret sauce. And yet the IET is found in WIOA, it's defined in WIOA, it's provided for in every state in our country, and yet we don't do them enough. We hardly do them. And we've been launching them in corrections inside of institutions around the country for the last 2 years, and have been piloting and doing technical assistance for a number of states on it, and was in Washington last week launching the national project. And the DOE is investing a lot of money in this. And you can see in the future that IET, and check it out, we just published 2 weeks ago, the IET in Corrections Toolkit, which can be found on the Links portfolio platform that I talked about. So check it out. Great tool, great tool. Everyone's talking Pell Grant now, right? Everybody know what's going on with Pell Grant? Pell Grant window is opening for people that are justice involved, the Pell Grant window. Yeah. So my glass has been half filled since I came home from prison. Everything is half filled. Just driving here from Chicago the other day, my glass, I couldn't have been happier. We had a nice ride seeing all Illinois. My glass is almost half filled, but when it comes to Pell Grant, my glass is not half filled. It's half empty. And the reason for that is, quite frankly, the Pell Grant window is an opportunity to give funding for people on a one-time deal. You can apply for Pell, you're one and done. But if we don't prepare people for college, and if they're not ready to go, then we're opening the door and setting them up for failure, right? So we really have to be thinking about what are we doing when we offer the Pell Grant inside of our institutions, and what are we doing to prepare people for that next step? And making sure that they succeed. Literally, I think there's 3% or less men and women inside of our jails actually get post-secondary degree today. It's just so small. And a lot of that is because we're just not doing enough. We also have been doing a lot nationally on the workforce, the president signed the infrastructure bill, 1.3 trillion dollars of funding coming down over the next few years to build our bridges and highways and good stuff. So if I'm sitting in your shoes and I'm thinking about career opportunities that there's going to be a future for, well, first of all, let's back up. If you're placing somebody in a job that's just as impacted for a job that no longer exists, or for a job that's going to be outdated tomorrow, shame on you, right? Shame on you. We need to be looking at those jobs that are sustainable down the road, that are true career pathways. Start looking at things like the infrastructure bill. Do you know what the most needed job in our country is today? Surveyors. They've aged out of the market. And we need surveyors to build our bridges and highways and do all this infrastructure stuff that we're talking about. And yet, we're not thinking that way. We got to be creative. And the truth is that many men and women that I work with are black and brown. They're from marginalized populations, and they often they don't know enough about those career opportunities. We need to educate people about the opportunities that are there, and career exploration needs to be a big part of that. The infrastructure bill, not as important in my mind as the Digital Equity Act. I made myself a promise when I came home from prison that I was going to try my very darndest to see that there was computers in every prison and jail in our country. Now, I can't say that I've accomplished a lot of that yet. I'm on my way. But I will say this, that the Digital Equity Act is the first bill that we've had in our country that actually is a call out specifically in the bill for prisons and jails and for justice, that mandates that we do a better job inside of our prisons and jails, giving them access and digital education so that we can get people prepared for when they come home. Right? People come home all the time. You know what, Mark, can you go and just file that job application on the computer over there, right in front of you? Just go ahead. And Mark's looking where do I turn this thing on at? How do I do this? And and then it says put in your email account. And Mark's I don't have an email account. And then they tell him, okay, there's your Gmail account. And now what do I do with it? How do I cut and paste it? Where do I put it in? How do I even get my email? Assume nothing when you come home. A lot of men and women have no experience on computers, or computers have changed so much that technology changes every day. Even cell phone technology. The Digital Equity Act, every state, including Illinois, filed their digital equity plan last July. You should be looking, that's $2.4 billion of funding coming down nationally, a lot to Illinois. You should be looking at your digital equity plan and saying, how can we use that in the work that we do? Maybe it's a computer lab that you want to build. Maybe it's a digital equity program or digital education program that you want to start. But start thinking about how you incorporate the Digital Equity Act. I often hear from educators and workforce developers all the time, there's just no funding. Somebody told me today, I'm not sure if they're in the room, somebody told me today that they ran out of funding this year. And not uncommon, I guess, but I was floored. I was are you looking at things like the Digital Equity Act to get funding? And have you applied for any of those opportunities? These are good ways of sustainability and getting additional funding outside of what you get from your government entities. Employers are the next bucket that we need to talk about. So what should we be looking at when we talk about this? And I guess I want to kick this to Andrea to get us kicked off and start it off a little bit, because I think it starts with the hiring process from an employer's end. Andrea, what is it that from an employer needs to be thinking about in the hiring process that could open the door a little bit more for those people just as involved?
So we'll skip over the law and we'll start with the background?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'd like to defer to the employer in the room, but you should have. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. The idea is that the hiring trends in HR, because of the fact that we have a labor shortage, HR and companies are looking at people, like Jeff mentioned, from marginalized communities that they never really considered before. And that not only means justice-impacted individuals, it might mean people with disabilities. It might mean people who don't have a 4-year college degree. And a lot of job descriptions are being rewritten to reflect this. So a lot of job descriptions are now being rewritten to focus not on traditional academic background and specific job history, because we used to only want to hire people who already had experience in the field or in the industry or in that actual role. But now a lot of job descriptions are being rewritten to focus on skills and competencies. And that's what we need to prepare our job seekers for, the skills and competencies and those transferable skills that they might have. So they might have worked in the kitchen and done food preparation, but what they had to do in that regard is memorize food protocol, learn how to use utensils, collaborate with their coworkers, make quick decisions, have a quick response rate. All of those skills are transferable to another job in another industry. And when we talk about competencies, we're talking about things like collaboration, adaptability, interpersonal skills, manual skills, digital skills, bilingual skills. So the resumes that people prepare look different now than the resumes that we prepared before for all employees. So the idea is to match the skills and competencies to what the employers are looking for. And in the selection process, I'll defer to Jeff to talk about the laws a little bit, but what the laws tell us, really guide us through the selection process to do things differently, like delay the background check until later in employment. And if if employers see that there's a conviction, then to have a conversation. The most recent law tells us that. And as workforce development specialists, you're the subject matter experts. You're the ones who have to communicate with the employers of what to expect and to communicate with your job seekers to prepare them to have those conversations. Because no matter who we are, if we're applying for a job, no matter what community we're from, we've all got a story. And we've all got to learn how to tell our story. And that's part of how you can prepare your job seekers.
Yeah, so I want to start there because I think that end part is the best part, the story part. So you may not remember a lot today of what Andrea and I have to say, and you're going to walk out of here and you may go and pick up the presentation or whatever, but you're going to remember, you know what, there was this white lawyer dude who practiced before the U.S. Supreme Court and then ended up doing some time away. You're going to remember the story. And I think we do a disservice to our clients when we don't help our clients tell their story. We don't. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Like, first of all, the premise is this. I want you to get in your head the most embarrassing thing you've ever done in your life. Got it? I see some of you smiling, some of you crying, but virtually, you got it? The most embarrassing thing you've ever done in your life. You got it up here? I'm not going to ask you or embarrass you, because last time I did that, it didn't go so well. So now I want you to imagine telling that to somebody you don't know and expecting that they're going to hire you for a job. Ouch. Really challenging. We have to work with our participants and people that are just as involved and getting them to understand self-responsibility and how to tell their story, and not make it about what the crime was or what they did or what happened in the past, but make it all about the lessons that they learned. What did you learn from the experience? By playing hide the ball and by not being transparent, despite the fact that Illinois has a ban the box law. Do you guys know what ban the box is? It's a law that says on an employment application, you can't ask someone, have they been convicted of a felony? Matter of fact, in Pennsylvania where we have it, you can't ask that question until there's a conditional offer of employment. Hi, I'd like to hire you at $10 an hour, and I need to ask you, is there anything in your background that would stop you from being able to hold this job? And the truth is that I am not a big proponent of ban the box. I think it's intended well, but by doing that, what you're doing is you're causing people to make assumptions. And what did I say? Assume nothing in this game, right? You're causing people to make assumptions based on somebody's looks. And that's a bad thing to have happen, in particular because you're setting people up for failure down the road. You play it out. Someone goes through the process. They go through a 5-interview process, and they're going to get the job. They get the offer, conditional on the background check. The background check comes back, and it's positive for what we all knew would have been on the table, and yet the first thing that employer, you tell me if I'm wrong, the first thing the employer's feeling is a little bit of deceit. Like, why didn't you tell me? Like, if you aren't honest about something as significant as where you've been the last 5 years, then, gosh, I'm not real sure I can trust you making deposits for me every week, right? It's a real challenge. There's a real push-pull there. But I believe in transparency, and I think it's a law that has some purpose to it. But we really need to be thinking about what we do with our background checks and how we background check, and making sure that, we look at that background check in a really different way. How long has the offense been? I would guarantee you that if you did a background check on yourselves, that just about everyone in this room would find something on that background check. Because it starts with any type of contact with the law. If you've gotten a traffic ticket, you've got a background. Anytime you have any contact with a police officer, that there is a record of that. And that is what we're talking about, not as severe as going away, I get it, but there are things on your record that often need to or should not be there to begin with. So background checks pose one of the biggest challenges for men and women coming home and how you deal with them. Occupational licensing is another big deal. Right before this call, I sit on the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Board and chair the Employment Commission for that. And I brought my notes because I didn't know if anybody believed me or not, but we got 2 pieces of recommendations, and one of them was on occupational licensing. We just pushed through our occupational licensing law 2 years ago, year and a half ago, and we got the governor now to recognize that we didn't go far enough, that we need to have, it can't be a blanket disqualifier because you've had a criminal conviction. I'll give you an example. In Pennsylvania, you could not get your barber license renewed if you had a criminal conviction. Is that crazy? So we really needed to look at them and take out those blanket disqualifications and allow the person to come in to tell their story before their occupational review board and say, okay, this qualifies. And things that are really old, make it a non-issue so that they can go forward. So looking at your state's licensing laws are really important, occupational licensing laws, see how you can change them or work with them. I'm not a huge fan of pardons and expungements. I think they're great tools, but the truth is they take time. They take time. People come home from incarceration. They don't have months to wait and get a pardon or an expungement through the system. There are great tools going down the road, but in the immediacy, getting somebody back to work, a pardon and an expungement only goes so far. The Illinois law took the EEOC regulations and it codified it. So if you're not familiar, you should check it out, but the law really did and is doing what most states are doing now by saying, look, if you're going to do a background check, then you need to look at certain things to make sure that these qualifiers are in place, and look at some of the conditions. If you are going to do a background check, you need to make sure that the crime actually relates to the nature of the work that you're going to be doing, which kind of makes sense, right? The analysis and the steps of things to look at are the facts and circumstances, the length of time of the offense, all of these things, how long it's been, are all things that go into the pool to kind of be considered, and I ask employers to look at them. But the truth is this, and we had this argument yesterday in our workshop, if I have 100 applicants, and I'm an employer, you got 100 applicants, it's pretty darn easy to say, I only need 5 people. I'm going to find a way to weed these out so I don't have to look at 100 applicants. And the easiest way really is just to say, all right, anyone that's got a background's first to go. It's easy to do, right? Yep. And it's going to save you a lot of money, right? Because it costs you money, HR time and everything else, bringing them in, all the expense and everything like that. So the truth is, employers have so much. We live in a country where we're at-will country, pretty much, at-will employment. You hire and fire at the will, and so therefore it makes it really challenging unless these laws have some teeth to them, unless there's really some penalty for all of it in going forward. So we talked about and we saw all the partners that we saw up on the screen earlier today, and I'm going to ask Andrea to chime in because my favorite term in talking about all this is it takes a village. This is not just a workforce issue. This is not just an education issue or a career training issue. We heard it today from the back. The young lady said behavioral health issues. Yes, I'm calling you out. Great job. 2/3 of the men and women that are incarcerated have a behavioral health problem. 2/3. What do we do? We should be providing those wraparound key supports that help people understand how to meet those challenges. When you go to prison, the things that don't happen when you come home is that housing doesn't automatically sprout up and give you a home. And the addiction problems that you had for all of your life, they don't go away forever, right? They don't cease those struggles don't cease when you come home. And you don't automatically have food that pop up and transportation, and you don't have a tie that you can wear for a job interview and a suit, and you don't have nice shoes and pants, and you don't have all these things that we all take for granted, like an identification, like a state-issued ID, and a social security card, and a birth certificate, and all those things you need to be employed and even get on the employer's books to begin with. It takes a village. It takes a village. So it really is all about the team and understanding how the team plays together, who's on the team. And you should have your playbook. You should have all of these people together so that you can work with them and kind of understand, who do I call for this? Who should I reach out for this support? And know that it is an ongoing battle. This is definitely this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And it's going to take time, and you're going to have to be methodical. And we had a discussion, Andrea and I had a discussion coming up here, and she was kind of talking to me about how I was able to be, make it through and and the challenges are every day. 84% of the collateral consequences that affect people coming home stay with them for life. 84% of those collateral, and there are 44,000 collateral consequences. They stay with people for life. They never go away. And it's really true. And how you chip away at them is knowing that the people in this room that are helping find career pathways are always there. They're always there for that next step. The and then what, right? The and then what? What happens next? So how do we do it, Andrea? You're an HR specialist, and we're talking about creating a more inclusive process. How do we do it from the employer end? What are the things that employers should be thinking about to make this more inclusive?
Well, so it's a numbers game. I'm not going to speak to the one employer in the room, but what I will say is that, just to reiterate, you are the experts in partnering. You know who you have to rely on to get your job done. I think that you shouldn't, like Jeff says, don't assume that the employers know about this. I think that you have to work with your employer partners. There are certainly some employers who are going to be a little bit more reticent, but you all have employer partners who there's a solid relationship with. Share that information with them. I've been speaking with employers across the country who are involved in hiring and selecting and developing justice-impacted individuals. They all have community partners. They have community partners with the housing, with transportation. Greystone Bakeries, for example, on the first day when when their employees are hired, and the first day of orientation, and the first day the employee gets full benefits, they have a Jewish Community Services there helping the employees with any problems that they have. And this is an ongoing relationship. So this is when we talk about this, don't assume that the employers know about these organizations. You have to pass that information on. You're the subject matter experts in this area. And a lot of the employers who are getting involved this is new to them. Because remember, these aren't populations that they've been looking at before. So we have who knew that there was a LinkedIn course for returning citizens? So there's a lot of information in the resource guide that I think that you should refer to. And I think that we'll talk more in a couple of slides about mentoring and partnering internally, but externally, you're the experts on it.
So it's interesting because one of the biggest excuses employers have is that I'm afraid of a lawsuit. If I hire John, I'm afraid of what happens if John messes up, or they're going to sue me. And there's the second piece, and I brought it with me so you can, the second piece that was passed today by Pennsylvania, our recommendation was a hold harmless bill in Pennsylvania for liability against employers, so that employers can't use that argument anymore of worrying about being sued, because it's just a fallacy. As a trial lawyer, they are the hardest claims to actually succeed on, a negligent hiring offense, which is generally what they're talking about. And we have to chip away at some of these things that are stopping employers from truly being successful at hiring and retaining. And then it's really understanding the culture and getting from the top down, understanding that you're giving someone an opportunity, but they need to be treated just like everybody else. I was mentioned yesterday, I did a project with Waste Management nationally, and they wanted to give bright orange vests to all the returning citizens. It's like, yeah, that ain't a good idea. You want to treat them just like anybody else in the process, but integrating them into the workforce means also understanding that there might be some challenges. You might have a parole officer call you every now and then and say, hey, did John show up this week? Is he there today? Or, he's got to get a drug screen, or he's got to come for this hearing this week. You got to give him some rope to be able to do that. And I struggle a little bit because from the employer end, the employers are saying, and somebody raised this yesterday in our workshop, they said, why should we treat John differently than all of our other employees? Like, why should we open the door up for John to do this? And they had a good point. If I have employees that I'm not allowing to go out and get drug tested on their own time for a problem they have outside of work, why should I let John do it while he's in work? And it's interesting because one of the suggestions of one of the groups was an employer actually has special shifts for people that are justice involved. So those people that maybe have to be at a hearing during the day, they put into a night shift. So they have a night shift program for people that are justice involved. I just think it's about being creative. It's about thinking through things differently, and understanding that you're going to have to be reactive if you want good labor and good talent. And then the other thing is just this transparency piece with everyone. And it has to get buy-in from the very top. All of the organization has to understand that we've all been this close. I spoke in Cape May a few years ago to the Correctional Educators Association, the 800 people in the room, and I had them, they were all executives, all administrators, executives in the correctional systems across New Jersey. I had them all stand up. And I asked them 3 questions. I had 4th planned, but I never got to it. By the 3rd question, everyone in the room was seated. And by the 3rd question, everyone in the room had committed something in their life that could have found them in a federal prison. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. It's one of those things where but for the grace of God, that we were this close to actually making a decision that may have landed us on a different pathway. And the truth is that there's a humanity that needs to come back into our system. Somebody from Pennsylvania, the past secretary, we had lunch, and he asked me about 2 years ago before COVID, if there was one thing I could change in the prison system, what would it be? And he thought I was going to say, let everybody out or come up with something crazy. No, and I told him, quite frankly, I said, all I would ask for is that every person inside of prison and jail be referred to by their name and not their number. I said, if we could just start bringing humanity back into our justice system and start recognizing how people, this is a person. They've made choices, and those choices are no different than the ones you and I have made. It's just sent them down a different path in a different direction. We talked about the interview and Common Core goals, being inclusive talent and really finding talent. And there's talent out there all the time. So I did a hard time. I was at a very severe place, and I learned to do some crazy things. Like I learned how to drive a tractor trailer. I learned how to drive a forklift and a backhoe. I worked in a commercial kitchen. I learned how to change oil on my car, which really got me because I had a Lexus for all my adult life. I had a Lexus as a lawyer. I came home from law school, and my law firm helped me buy a Lexus. I had a Lexus all my entire career. And then when I realized how simple it was to change oil on a car, I was like, I can't believe I was paying somebody $250 to change oil on my stinking car for the last 20 years. I want all that money back. Bring it back. But that's the truth. So I learned how to do it, but there's really a lot of talent inside the walls. And there were people that could operate a backhoe, and we had a bet once that this guy Santos could flip a quarter into the bucket of the backhoe, those 4-ton buckets, and the first problem we had was finding a quarter. You're in prison. You don't have money. So we found a quarter, and within 2 minutes, he was able to flip that quarter into the bucket. And the truth is that Santos is somebody, if I am a construction company or if I'm a gas company and I'm doing some serious digging outside, I want that guy on that backhoe. If he's flipping a quarter in a bucket, I want his talent on my company. And that's what you see over and over again in prison. And then that talent goes and can be translated into different things, but we don't use the expertise inside of our prisons enough, and we don't recognize their value as they come home. And CDL driving is another big one. When I was away, I taught a CDL class while I was in prison. Now, I had never been in the cab of a tractor trailer before in my life. Literally, never. The problem was that people wanted to be CDL drivers, but they couldn't pass the test. So I taught them the test, and the other guys taught them how to drive a truck. So the talent is there, but understanding how that all comes into play is really important. I do want to move on to the reality that this is a team sport. That there are other pieces in play that we have to be thinking about. And if anyone is anyone a training partner here? Does training, skill and training partners? Yeah. If you got someone that's come to you and they have a certification in something that they've gotten either inside or outside of prison, then those 3 words that I mentioned before, and then what? They better be loud and clear. They better be loud and clear, because I don't believe that a certification alone changes much. I believe you should be thinking about that stackable credential that gets them to the next level, to that next place. So you should always be asking them, okay, you got that certification in ServSafe, and then what? What's next for you? Where are you going after that? But think about your partners and the partners that are coming, but also, the education partners. Frustrating for me, working with the DOE, is that people are this close inside to getting their GED or high school diploma. They walk outside the doors and life takes over, and then that GED becomes such a less priority. We should be making that bridge, that connector inside of the walls. Don, when you come home, here's where you're going for your GED. Here's where you're going to finish up your program. You finish up your certification or whatever it is. And then things like legal support and some basic needs. Community partners, I do want to mention, they do play a key role in all of this. And that key role is really about understanding that you need to be patient, that I don't like, nor do I believe in second chances. I'll say again, I don't like, nor do I believe in second chances, because most of the people that I work with never had a first chance, right? And then why stop at 2? How about 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th chances? So I think that everyone deserves a chance to kind of work, to have an opportunity and to kind of work through the system. And for you, people that are in the workforce setting, I think the rules are pretty clear that you need to listen. And someone they always hit me with this, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we speak. It's even more so in the justice space. We really should be listening to what our clients and participants are telling us, and what we need to hear is what they need, but we need to ask the question. We need to be curious and be their coach. They often don't have somebody on their sideline that's working with them to help them kind of move to the next place. And then be patient. Be patient with them. Know that, again, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's going to take them some time coming home, getting adjusted, feeling their way, understanding where they're going next. I do think that education does hold the key. You're not going to go through too much of that. From the corrections end, it is a culture change. We have to start thinking about how we change culture in our prisons and jails, and that really starts with understanding the value of education and career opportunities and career exploration and doing things while people are away, but also recognizing that when they come home, about 46% of our population are incarcerated because of technical violations of our probation and parole system. So we need to be thinking about what happens on the outside and help people navigate that, in particular, finding a job and a career opportunity that keeps them going forward. So we have a few seconds left, and I just want to end with a short story and then to get you thinking about when you walk out this door. When you walk out this door, what is it that's going to have changed? So I just started this policy I mentioned yesterday that when you go to a conference, when you leave the conference, it's wonderful. You've met some people, you've had some networking, you've seen some workshops, but how have you really moved the needle? So my job is to get you to move the needle to the and then what? So when you walk out the door, I want you to think about the and then what? Who is it that you need to reach out to? And I'll have my cards up here, and I welcome those discussions, but who is it you need to reach out to help participants that you work for, or your colleagues, or your boss, or your administrators, or your staff, or your HR departments? Who is it we need to be talking to help move things forward, to help really change the way we see the world and work with people that are just as involved? And that's not an easy question to do, but I encourage you to take some time before you walk out of this room to just write down who it is or even the category before you walk out of the room so that you can follow up. I have a policy now in my new company that is, we have people report out every time they go to a conference. It's mandatory. You got to tell us who you met. You have to tell us, was there a good product that you saw in the vendor booth? Or what workshop did you go to? What did you learn out of it? What was your takeaway? Who should we be talking to? And then what? What next? What next from going to the conference? What did you get out of it that we should be really thinking and targeting about? So we've talked about a lot of different things. I will open the floor for a little bit of questioning. I know we only have about 5 minutes left, but Andrea, before I'm not going to let you off that easy today, because I do want you to kind of give us, from the HR perspective, are things changing?
Yeah, I think they're changing. I think they're changing because it's like anything else. There's a need out there. Companies need bodies, and so they're changing. And in some industries, that change is going to last for a while, like manufacturing. There's a projected $2 million gap by 2030. But for other industries, the window's closing. So, we have an opportunity now, and we have an opportunity to get people to work. And you guys, I know that, you feel overwhelmed in your jobs, but you really are in a pivotal moment. There's a pivotal moment right now. You're the experts. You have a lot more power and knowledge and information than you realize. Don't be afraid to share it. Don't be afraid to use it. You prepare your job seekers for what lies ahead. Prepare the HR people who you work with for what to expect. You have that knowledge. You got to share it.
So I'll leave you with this too, real quick story. There's a great YouTube video that's out there of a little boy. I think he's like 4th or 5th grade. His name is Clint, and Clint has a problem, and his problem is that he can't sit still in class. I think I've shown this before. Can't sit still in class. So Clint is constantly drumming. He's using his hands, he's drumming constantly, tapping on desks, and he can't stop. And one day a teacher sends him down to the principal and says, Clint, you gotta stop doing this. It's disrupting in class. And he says, look, go back to class and just sit on your hands. So he goes back and he sits on his hands, and Clint is like, it lasts a whole 5 minutes before Clint's back drumming. He's boom, he says, keep tapping. Everything's tapping on his desk. So one day the teacher says, Clint, you gotta stay after class. And Clint's like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And he stays after class, and the teacher sits him down, and he says, Clint, I want you to know something first. You're not in trouble. And he says, second, he says, I have to ask you a question. He said, did you ever think about playing the drums? And he reached into his desk, and he pulled out 2 drumsticks. And Clint has become one of the most famous drummers in the world, and made it through college on a full scholarship for drumming, and has played with the Blue Man Group and a whole bunch of other places around the world. So I tell the story for one reason. One, you should check it out. If you ever have an opportunity to show it and see it, you should do that. But second is because our jobs in this room is often to see in other people what they don't see in themselves. So take some time and listen. The work that you do is really vitally important, and it's changing lives. And too often we don't see the results of that because they don't come back, and we don't see what success really looks like. But I promise you, it's out there and it's happening. And for people that are justice involved, it happens one student at a time, and it happens over time. It's not going to happen all at once. So I will entertain a question or two. Are we good on time? Okay. One or two questions, anybody? Do you want to give me one? Will it satisfy?
Are employers receptive to the stories individuals tell to explain their backgrounds today? Job seekers actually take the job.
So I would say, yeah, the question is, are employers more receptive when candidates tell their story when they've been justice involved? And I would say that yes and no. Yes, they are often very receptive when someone's out there. So they're often receptive. Do they always get the job? No, they don't always get the job. But there's a bigger thing in play here, is what you're doing is you're working with that individual and getting them to tell their story and to share their story in a way that they're practicing and seeing it. But even more important is you're setting them up for not disappointing that employer in the future when he does hire them and they've not heard the story. So I think when you weigh them out, the truth is that if you're looking at retention, we're going to be talking that today at 1:15 about how to retain talent, is if you're looking at retention and really keeping people in a career pathway, that's the secret sauce, is getting people to be honest and transparent and tell their stories. There you go. Well, it was great presenting to you. Thank you, Andrea, for helping me. And thank you, everybody else. Have a great conference.